Thanks again, Chairman. Mr. Watts, you've been a U.S. Army infantry officer. You've been an FBI special agent on the Joint Terrorism Task Force. You've been the executive officer of the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, and you've been a consultant to the FBI's Counterterrorism Division and National Security Branch. So you clearly take American national security very seriously. It is and has been your life's work. So when you say the Kremlin disinformation playbook, which we're talking about here, will also be adopted by authoritarians, dark political campaigns, and unregulated global corporations who will use this type of social media manipulation to influence weaker countries, harm less educated, vulnerable populations, and mire business challengers. You're not just talking about the Russian election manipulation operation getting worse and having to be contained. You're talking about it as if it's a technology that other bad actors can adopt and have it metastasize entirely into new fields of dissimulation, propaganda, and so forth.
Yes,
correct?
Everybody will duplicate this if they don't believe in the rule of law, if they want to destroy democracies from the inside out. Anyone with enough resources and time and effort, if they put it against this, they can duplicate this. I could duplicate it if I chose to.
So if we don't stop it now, it's going to get exponentially worse.
Yes, and I think the one thing that we should recognize is even in the U.S. political context, if we don't put some sort of regulation around it, if bodies like this don't decide how we want American politics to work, everybody will be incentivized to use this same system against their political opponents, and if you don't, you will lose.
I asked the last panel to offer an opinion on how helpful they thought botnets were on the general spectrum of being a really wonderful thing and a great help to mankind versus a menace. In the context of this particular threat, how do botnets fall on that spectrum in your view?
I can't imagine in any way how social bots amplifying information are more benefit than harm. It empowers the weak. It empowers those with technological advantages. You can spread a message, true or false, worldwide. It is a great tool. The computational propaganda is powerful for two separate reasons. One, it can create accounts that look like you and talk like you, which makes you more likely to believe it. The other thing is it can replicate a message so many times. The more times you see it, the more likely you are to believe it. So it can actually create false worlds in the social media space.
Sounds like both of those characteristics are fraud characteristics.
Yeah, it could be.
Not showing up who you are and pretending that you're bigger or more than you are.
Yeah, you could employ the same system even for spear phishing campaigns, in the financial space to hack into accounts. You can put out, false information or spear phishing in a very dramatic way for any cause.
How about shell corporations? Are they a hindrance to trying to penetrate these disinformation campaigns and figure out who's really involved?
Yes, I mean, I'm actually surprised that the Russians made the mistake of buying ads directly through the Internet Research Agency. I would have thought they would use a cutout or rented more. I would have used some sort of intermediary. That's a more sophisticated intelligence approach and one the Kremlin made a mistake on this time.
By the way, crazy eventuality. In the time that we've been having this hearing, I made a comical reference to an imaginary entity called Americans for Puppies and Prosperity. In the time that we've had this hearing since I mentioned that, there is now an Americans for Puppies and Prosperity up with a picture of a puppy, and it's being tweeted out. So,
congratulations.
I was recently in Finland, I presented to the Europeans for the new hybrid center to fight this kind of, and before we had even left, there was a false account posing as the hybrid center they launched in Europe.
So let me jump into the problem of the dark web, particularly when you're dealing with recruitment for jihadi violence. Very often the initial touch is made through traditional social media, Twitter, Facebook, whomever, and then as soon as they think they've got a likely prospect, they move to a dark website where law enforcement can't follow them and where the people who were at that table before you can't track them.
Right.
Question for the record, because I don't think we have the time to go through all that now, but could you give some advice on what either your predecessors in those chairs or we in Congress should be doing about that social media dark web link where so much of the evil transpires.
You radicalize in the open and you recruit in the dark.
Yes.
And that's sort of how the system works. So the more you can clamp down on the open space, the better you're going to be. There's less people that come in contact, and it is a staircase that gets you to there.
Last question. If X is the total amount of Russian election propaganda interference activity taking place in America, how much of that X do you think your predecessors in those chairs are aware of and addressing? Almost all, a tiny proportion?
No, a fraction of it. We monitored networks in the lead up to the election going back 2015, 2016. One network which promoted the Answer-Lick campaign that we saw in July 2016, we wrote about at the Daily Beast, half of it's still there today.
So a tiny fraction is all the
tiny fraction. I would put at most, it depends on the platform. Some are better than others. I would say Facebook's probably removed the most, Twitter the least. I would bet Twitter is less than a quarter. And remember that this didn't end on Election Day. They're repopulating these social media platforms ad nauseum, and they're trying to influence and infiltrate every U.S. audience space, by the way. The Russians see it on both sides, left, right, you know, whatever it might be.
Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you.